We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. As people roll in, welcome Eric, welcome Hugh, Severin, Jackie, of course, Jay, Fred, and Dwight. Just waiting for Eric to give us an update on the brutally warm weather that they have there in sunny Southern California.
Bro, it's raining.
Oh, cry me a river.
It's not no, it's not raining that hard. There will be no river.
Okay,
That's okay. It'll stop tomorrow. We'll survive.
there you
We'll
go.
survive. I mean, it's yeah, like yeah, it'll be done tomorrow.
There
But
you
then it's
go.
gonna rain like all week. So
Well, it's actually been so yesterday was pretty decent. It's 30 degrees right now. I thought it was going to be warmer today. Oh, it was 42 yesterday. That's
uh,
beautiful.
yeah, it's
39
61
here.
and raining.
Hmm.
Yeah, every weekday next week it's supposed to rain. So
Is it?
yeah, I mean we're gonna get down to shivering 53.
Hmm. So close to, blizzard weather.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. So one moment here, we'll get started. All right. We're going to go ahead and kick things off. Hope everybody's having a good day. Good Wednesday. We are at the middle of the week, and today we have Dwight Group back with us, and Dwight is going to be talking about security drift is real and why MSP environments become insecure over time and how to fix that. And with that being said, Dwight, welcome. Appreciate you being back here this week, and if you don't mind giving our audience, for anybody that missed you last week, just give a brief overview of yourself, and then you can go ahead and kick things off. And we'll go on for 15 20 minutes as normal, and then we'll open up to group discussions. So once Dwight is done with his initial presentation, then we'll open up questions. So Dwight, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, if you missed out last week, my name's Dwight. I spend a lot of my time working as a pen tester, cybersecurity analyst. I've worked in the federal space, SLED software, education, and local, both public and private sectors. I run a small cybersecurity company, and we focus mostly on cybersecurity services for small businesses, all the way up to government contracting, which is at the moment been interesting to say the least. With that said, moving forward, like Dan said, we'll be discussing security drift and in MSP environments, why it becomes insecure over time. Um, so the hard truth is most MSP environments, they don't get hacked because of 0 days or advanced nation state threats, right? They get breached because of security drift. And what that is, security drift is, it's firewall rules added, a year over plus that don't get reviewed, or it's the admin account that was supposed to be temporary that never got removed, or it's the backup configuration everyone assumes is working, and doesn't when it needs to be called upon. So security drift is real. Um, it's silent and it compounds over time. And I think this is, it's just the nature of our environment, our industry, especially with things moving at the quick pace that they are, which is challenging um, for folks to stay up to date and keep on top of that. Um, with that said, a SIM tool is highly recommended. A SIM standing for Security Information Event Management. Um, everybody's business, everybody's environment is different. So really, it's just a matter of each individual company assessing their own risk, and how MSPs can fill the gaps. So moving forward, today we're going to break down why MSP environments naturally become insecure, how controlled decay happens across dozens of client environments, and most importantly, how to appropriately fix that. Now I got 15 minutes, so I'm going to just touch on some key points moving forward here. So drift equals deviation from our baseline, right? We all start out with the baseline. So any deviation from that. Um, assumed controls versus actual controls. Security drift happens when your documented security posture no longer matches reality. It's not malicious, it's not reckless, it's operational. Um, every MSP manages multiple tenants, different tech stacks, custom client expectations, and ongoing change request. I know, and just to touch on change request, I know POAM management. I don't know if that's such a thing in the public and private, and I know a lot of smaller companies don't, typically deal with POAMs and STIGs, but that's ongoing change request um, environment dealing with POAMs, which seem to be interesting in their own, which essentially is an exception to a risk to move forward, documented. Over time, MFA exceptions accumulate, firewall rules expand, monitoring exclusions increase, backup scopes change, and endpoint policies diverge. Two, why MSPs are especially vulnerable. Key drivers scale across dozens, hundreds of environments, client specific customization, technician turnover, which is huge. I would say 3 and 4, technician turnover and the sprawl of tools seems to be, a key weak link in the chain, if you will, right? Because you set it up, everybody knows what they're supposed to do, and somebody leaves, and then what do you got? And then tools are changing, and then I guess the idea is don't be the only one to know. That way, if somebody leaves, somebody else can easily fill that role. continuous validation, um, which is, continuous monitoring. And we'll get into more of that continuous validation here in a second. So MSPs face a unique multiplier effect. One client drifting is manageable, several drifting at different speeds. That creates a different systemic risk. Um, Here's what accelerates drift in MSPs. So customization pressure, clients demand clients demand exceptions. Each one creates deviation from standard baseline. Technician turnover, tool sprawl, um, assumed configuration. So technician turnover, new engineers inherit environments with undocumented history. Tool sprawl, your tools, your EDR, your backup, your SIM, all configured slightly different across tenants, and then assumed configurations where we deploy MFA, multi-factor authentication everywhere. Sounds good until you validate it. So MSPs often believe they're standardized, but rarely verify it continuously. And so that's that validate and verify. It's important to, once you set up the environment, you set up the tools, and it needs to be configured that you validate it continuously and consistent validation and verification, hence continuous monitoring. Then moving on to the third topic, how incidents actually happen. Common patterns, dormant admin accounts, partial MFA rollout, multi-factor, partial, meaning only certain people in your environment have the MFA set up using personal devices for work versus work tablets or phones. Backup misconfiguration, logging not retained, and EDR disabled during troubleshooting. When breaches happen in an MSP managed environment, post-incident reviews often reveal a legacy domain admin account still active, MFA enabled for users but not service accounts, EDR agent offline for longer than anticipated, backup jobs successful but not restorable, right? And this is all, a lot of times these things happen, and we don't even know, and then we go to grab the backup and we can't restore it. SIM alerts unreviewed due to alert fatigue. So the operational fix. So control, like I was saying, validation and verification, not just deployment. So the framework for fixing drift, establish a measurable baseline, implement continuous configuration and validation, conduct reoccurring control audits, and tie drift detection to executive reporting. So to fix drift, MSPs must move from we deploy security to we continuously validate security. Step one, define non-negotiable baselines. MFA enforced for all identities. Privileged account monitored. Backup restored, tested quarterly. Firewall rules reviewed biannually, or more. Step two, automate drift detection. So monitor for disable agents, alert on admin account creation, validate policy alignment against baseline, and step three, schedule reoccurring control audits. not penetration testing, but configuration validation. Step 4, report drift metrics. Um, percentage of endpoints with active EDR, endpoint detection response, percentage of accounts with MFA, and then backup restore success rate. Security posture must be measured, not assumed. Um, so the strategic takeaway is security drift is not a technical failure. It's a governance failure. Um, the longer environments go without validation, the more risk compounds. And so with the closing, security drift is inevitable. Um, unmanaged drift is optional, is optional. MSPs um, really, it's it's not about just managing the services. It's just about, I would say, continuous monitoring, um, and just really, setting up a SIM solution. Um, so that's what I got for 15 minutes. We can go into the questions if that's okay, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. Who wants to jump out first? Who's got their first question?
I'll go.
Go. Go ahead, Jay.
So, would you say that this in the MSP environment is because we get lackadaisical thinking we know everything, and that's why we're not on top of our own stuff?
I wouldn't say, that you think you know everything or that you're lackadaisical. I just think that, again, um, depending on how many projects, you're managing, it's a time constraint, right? And it's the speed at which these updates and patches are hitting these tools that you're using. Um, and so to have some type of system that's catching it, right, and bringing it to your forefront, so how to prioritize the high risks from the medium and low risks. um, I think with big data, you know and we all know this, I mean, there's so much information. It's overwhelming, right? And then people are burning out. There's so much information. So I think the ability to prioritize and focus on only the critical and the high uh, vulnerabilities in any of these tools, and to just be in constant contact with, whether it's Microsoft or whether it's Google or any of these software companies. Most of them have, numbers and email chat that you can reach out to them, and just be in constant, have somebody that's continuously working with these companies on top of the patches, on top of any updates. And, you know, you don't really need a SIM solution depending, on how big your agency is. Um, but yeah, that would be my question. I wouldn't say it's something that is, something that you're missing intentionally. I think we all have good intentions. We're all smart. We're all confident in our abilities. It's just a matter of things happen. We're all human, right? And so things fall by the wayside. And so I think the more eyes you have on something, if you miss something, somebody else will pick it up.
Mm.
So in relation to Jay's question, um, would you say that security drift is more about technology process, um, or human behavior? So technology process or human behavior? or all the above?
I would say all of the above, but it starts with with technology, right?
Yeah.
So if there's an update and you know and you miss it and you don't update, your phone or your computer, just as an example, right? Then it becomes a personal uh, oversight.
So would you recommend that, I mean, many of us in the channel, we're constantly going to different IT conferences. We're learning about new tools that are out there. We're learning about new ways to do things. We're on calls like this. We're constantly learning about how we can become better at what we do. Um, it's great to hear the stuff, but execution is what matters. So is there a time frame, quarterly, semi-annually, annually, in which we should assess, the technology, the process, and the human behavior to ensure that we don't have that drift?
Yes, I mean, and that's a good point. Uh, I would say, again, depending on the size of your environment, the way your business architecture is structured within your company, you have your stakeholders, right? You have your CEO, then you have your project manager, and then you have your task leads, and then you have um, let me backtrack. In your project management, you have people that are working strategically, and then you have people that are task leads, and then people boots on the ground that are operational. And so it's just important, I think, to have a good company business organization, and each entity needs to understand their responsibilities. That way, it's not they're not bumping heads or getting in the way of each other, right? And with that said, you know, if you have an event information, a security information event management system set up, you can configure it to give you daily, hourly, daily, weekly reports um, on anything that's amiss. So it really just would depend on how often you want to be notified of anything that is not matching up, needs to be corrected and fixed. Again, I think training is very beneficial, um, and to have a consistent um, weekly training or monthly or quarterly training that reminds people of, hey, this is our goal, these are our objectives, and this is what we need to stick to.
Excellent. Other questions out there?
I know it's easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
And it's like it's you can have good intentions, and but how do you I think we live in a world where people are so individual, right? And it's hard to build that team dynamic. And then you run into a lot of, uh people want to go their own way. It's it's more of a how to work with people. Like everybody in this room, is smart. We know how to get the tools, install the tools. That's the easy part, right?
Yeah.
But how do we work together is the key, right? Um, and a lot of people, for me, when I'm working for somebody, I'm a yes man. I'm all yours. You hire me, I do what you say. Yes, sir. Get it done. I don't, even if I disagree with it, right? Um, I do it because that's what you're asking me to do. You're my boss. I do it. Now, if I'm running a job, then I transition my mindset into now, okay, now I'm not the worker, I'm the guy running the project, right? And then so um, you have it's developing the soft skills, giving people to express themselves without going in a direction that could jeopardize the project. And so it's an ongoing dynamic for sure. And I think, people, what we say is treat people the way they want to be treated, right? Not the way you think they should be treated. And so if you, try to understand how people want to be treated and treat them the way they want to be treated, that helps them uh, not feeling like that they're being told what to do, that they have freedom to um, do their work and so it's an ongoing challenge. But again, I'm not a business relations guy. I'm more of a tech guy, and I just work and get stuff done. But when I'm managing product projects, I try to, you know everybody's different, and so it just depends on how you can build relationships with people. Some people work well together, others don't, and it's just important to identify that.
The other thought I have too is whether drift is uh, more centered around those organizations that are mature or those that are in that growth mode. My initial thought, and then you can jump in here, is you know
Hmm.
those that are in growth mode. They've got that passion. They've got that incredible passion. And I don't want to say that those that are in mature phase don't have passion, but it's not the same, inevitably, as somebody that's in growth mode. They're excited. They're constantly looking for new ways. And I think the longer we've been in the business, it's easy to become complacent and we just let things go, not necessarily in a bad way, but we don't put as much time and energy into making sure that we do have the latest, that we are following the right process, policies, procedures, and so on. So I gave my answer. Curious what your thoughts are. So mature versus those that are in growth mode, where does that drift uh, become more predominant?
That's a good point, Dan. And I think, even with mature companies, uh, they get hacked, and it's because I think the size, they're too big. I wouldn't say too big, but the size of um, their corporations are so large, it's just impossible to keep track of everything.
Hmm.
Um, Even if you have all the tools, the latest, greatest tools, and the smartest people in the room, um, the sheer size, like Sony was hacked, Solar Winds is hacked. Even CrowdStrike was dealing with some issues. You know, it's not a matter of who you are, if, when. It's just a matter of time. And so, unfortunately, that's not a comforting answer. But I think for the mature companies, it's just size. Like I believe it was Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a large government contractor. I'm sure everybody's heard of them. Just lost a lot of their contracts with the IRS because they accidentally leaked some tax information. And it's like, well, accidentally, aren't you a security company? You shouldn't be accidentally leaking anything. But this happens, you know? And so I would say size complicates the equation. And then with like startup companies, I think it's just, a lot of startups, nobody wants security. It's like the elephant in the room, right? It's like it slows progress. It's not exciting, right? People like developing stuff, building stuff. They don't care if it's secure. It slows everything down. And so startups, they have this, this excitement, rightfully so. And then you mentioned security, and it's like you just killed their buzz, right? It's like, oh no, security, right? What do you mean we have to do this? What do you mean there's policy? No, right? And then so basically they don't do it, right? Um, I would say that's part of the issue with startups, is it's just basically it's just a big pain to have to deal with security. And if you don't, a lot of smaller companies, they don't have to meet compliance or regulations, right? They're not a most like state, local government, they have to meet compliance, so they have to do security, right? But if you don't have to do security, why would you, right?
So, before I jump in with another question, does anybody else have anything that they wanted to ask Dwight?
I'll tell you what will help, right? You know, and everybody knows this, but and this is the problem, like overworked and underpaid, right?
Mhm.
If you want me to sit here and continuously monitor your environment and look through your logs and make sure everything's secure, you have to pay me, right? And you have to make me feel good. You have to make me feel like I'm appreciated, right? And if you're underpaying somebody and you're throwing too much work on them, they're not going to care, right? And so if you really want somebody to sit there and continuously monitor things, you have to make them, and it's little things. Even if you're not paying somebody a large salary, just a simple, conversation every week. Say, hey, how's it going? Be friendly to people, and or Amazon gift cards or DoorDash or just something, you know, so people don't feel like they're just in the trenches with their head down working, you know, and and then it's like, well, what? How did you miss this? You were buried in, you know. Uh,
Yeah.
so I think again, we live in a capitalist society, right? And so nobody cares if it's practical, you know. And but this is innovation too. So it's exciting.
Yeah.
Innovation isn't practical a lot of times, right? And but it's exciting, and so it's just a money thing, right? Like, so if as managed service providers somebody comes to us and say, hey, we need you to manage our systems for our company, we have this and this, manage it. And then we go and we configure it and we set it up, and then they're happy and they're good. you know did we state in that statement of work document that we signed, or those rules of engagement document that we signed, hey, by the way, scope creep is a real thing, and you know here's what we're offering, here's the work we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it. And once the scope creep starts, we're going to be basically revisiting our agreement, and we're going to be charging you this much for continuous monitoring, and this is what it's going to cost for quarterly reports. And I just think with any business, anybody that I've ever worked with, people are just too busy, there's too much going on. And so how do we simplify that, right? And what I like to say is um, it's there's a lot of work to be done, and it's job security, because the people that can get in there and really do a good job and focus on what needs to be done. Those are the people that are going to stick out over time and be appreciated. The people that are coming in just to try to get the work and you know and that are just in it for the money. Sooner or later it's going to be evident. And money is good and all, but you got to really love what you do and enjoy what you do. And then I think that will outlast just to try to make the money approach.
Yeah. Yeah, I think building that culture is so critical. Building that culture around, the discipline of following through on
Mm-hmm.
policies, procedures,
Mm-hmm.
and the use of the proper tools. I think there are, and I'd be curious if anybody in here wants to share their thoughts in here, but there are a lot of tools out there. VCIO Toolbox has their tools centered around cybersecurity and ensuring that you're not missing crossing a T or dotting an I, similar to like my IT process from the team over at Kaseya, or IT Glue, HubSpot, like all those things are so critical. We can have all the greatest tools, but if we don't have a culture
Mm-hmm.
around the discipline related to it, and that culture, I think, needs to be that the way we can make our jobs easier and to take a lot of the heat off of what we're doing so we're not having to do those trivial things and we can focus on, more strategic things, um, is to ensure that we are following the rules and we are using those processes and procedures because they're in place for a reason. It's not just to say you have to do it this way, but we
Right.
know it's in place because it it will ensure that we are doing and following those best practices. And but I think discipline and that culture around that is so important.
The other thing too, and you guys know this, is you try to rush through something, right? And then you have to go back several times and fix it or change it.
Right.
Just slow down, do it right. It might seem like it's more methodical, slow, and it's taking longer, but in the end, if you do it that way, you don't have to go back several times.
Yep.
You know, it's like the tortoise and the hare. The rabbit's running all over the place, right? Can't run straight and get to the end of the line, and then the tortoise is going over so slow, and he wins the race, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll go back to my college days of working for Kinko's. The one of the mottos was done right the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you can redo something, but you know, does it have an impact on your credibility? Absolutely. Does
Right.
it make it look bad? Of course. Even more important in our business, if not done right the first time, we're putting our
Mm-hmm.
clients at risk. It's one thing talking about Kinkos and, oh, you didn't do it right the first time, so you got to make more copies and you got to throw the old ones away. We're talking about a business that, security that could completely shatter an operation if we don't follow those policies and procedures properly. We cannot take that lightly. And I don't know, hopefully we all do, but I don't know that everybody truly understands the risks that each of us are in operating, whether you own, you lead as an executive, a managed services provider. It's not a car wash. It's not car
No,
in,
it's
car out.
it's
And
it's definitely not. It's very, it's challenging. And sometimes keeping it simple and small is really your only way to secure something, right? That's why you hear a lot of people like in the government, like secret knowledge, like top secret information. They don't use anything that's connected to the internet. They don't use, because really the only way to be secure is to not be connected to anything. And it's kind of like,
right.
the old school way of how things were set up were actually more secure, right? In a way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but they don't integrate into a lot of these new softwares. So I think it's a juggling act, and you have to, you know, I would, and that's where you get into like, network segmentation and DMZ zones. That kind of is like, having something that's offline, like a, you know, demilitarized zone and network segmentation, and then proxies and VPNs. That's kind of like the old school way of saying, hey, we have a server, in an underground bunker with a key lock, and you can't get into it. It's
Right.
got no internet. It's got, a server of its own. It's not connected to anything. And so this is, with this part of the issue with, cloud and cloud security and everybody moving to the cloud, and but I mean, it just depends on the sensitivity of your information, right?
Well, let me ask this. So you do a lot of pen testing, and I'm assuming that there are situations where you're doing follow up maybe a year later, 6 months later, whatever the case may be. So tell me about like what surprises you or what jumps out at you most where you've gone through, done a pen test, you've identified where remediation needs to take place, where they need to, bring things up to standards, and that's done. And then a year later, there's like either new things or the same things. What can you give any examples or stories about that?
Yes. There's always, so as an example, right? Let's say I'm doing a pen test for your company, Dan, and you have a software that you built, um, or it's a mobile application. Um, um, and that's the thing. There's network. I would say networks are a little bit more secure, right? So first we got to establish, is it a network or is it an application, a software, a web application? That's step one, right? Nobody, I wouldn't say nobody, but networks really aren't the main concern these days. It's more about somebody um, gaining access to your software, your web application. So let's say, you know, anybody on this call, they have a software and they're ready to, it's in the dev state, and you developed it. Ideally, you want me to go in there and look at it when you're developing it, right? And making sure the code's secure. Then you're ready for production. And then once it's ready to go production, then I would test it again. And then at that point, obviously you're going to find more issues in the dev state, right? In the dev stage. And that's what it's for. And so it's just crucial to really make sure that in your dev environment that you find as much as you can and fix it and clear it up. And then once you get into um, your production environment, then you go back and test it again. And again, like, there's going to be some acceptable risk. Nothing is secure, just not. The question is what's the severity? And so you only focus on the high and I would say the critical, the high, and maybe the mediums. Um, and and so let's say we do all that, and I come back to you and I say, Dan, I'm still finding these mediums. Well, nobody, what's the percentage of somebody actually, they really gotta, have a reason to come after you to really spend the amount of time it takes to exploit a medium or low vulnerability. So a lot of people go after the low hanging fruit, the easy stuff, right? So the easy stuff is the critical and the highs. That's easy. So, let's say we do that. Let's say, even we fix all the criticals, the highs, the mediums, and all you do, you have these lows hanging there. And then what happens is a policy changes, right? And then the policy says that, well, your code has to be um, compiled a certain way to meet this compliance, to meet this policy. And then so the rules change, and you weren't aware that that policy changed. And then now something changes, and now you're not able to integrate with, let's say, your Google Workspace or your Microsoft Office. And so if you don't have anybody checking on those things, that could be something that could come back to get you. Or um, there's there's just so many things that could come at you. But I would just say, like, it's just a matter of your code. So your developer, you really have to be, working with your developer and making sure that they're using the proper tools um, to inspect the code, right? And if there's any code that's presenting any vulnerabilities that it needs to be remediated. Now, for instance, like I'm working with a company, okay, that that has a software. It's older, and they've updated their software code. They've done the best they can do. Super smart, genius, freaking software developer. I was in there looking at their code. My head was spinning. I was like, wow, this looks amazing. Great job. But they have somebody on their end testing their code. They've done several pen tests, and they keep finding stuff that's wrong with the code. And so this developer's like, I don't know what else to do. I've already gone back in, I've fixed everything, right? And so now here I am, I'm asked to focus on this like edgy, specialized circumstance where somebody can find it's called a race condition and a timing. Uh, it's race conditions and timing. And so at the end of the day, like it's this very minute vulnerability that could be exposed, right? And race conditions and timing is basically just when when an attacker, like if you're logging into a dashboard and it prompts you for your username and password, and it's or let's say you're selling licenses, right, at $50. You have and you sold me 10 licenses at $50, right? But I'm able to go in there and mess with the timing and the synchronization of these licenses, and and now I'm able to get more for free, right? And that's because the timing on the back end of the code isn't syncing up right. And so now I'm stealing licenses from you and you don't know it. I've already bought 10 at $50, but now I'm stealing more from you and giving them to other people, right? Kind of like Netflix. Like you can only have it on your if you buy one subscription, right? You're only supposed to have it on your TV. But if you're gonna have it on your phone or your computer, you're gonna share it to your wife and your kids. You have to pay for all those, right? But what people do is they manipulate that and they make it so to where you can't see that I'm getting more licenses, right? Again, it just depends on um, you know the nature of the industry. Again, everybody has a different motive for hacking somebody. One, they want to get money, or it's reputational. They just want to mess with somebody's reputation. blackmail, stealing design documents, architectural documents. So it all depends on the motive, right? What's the motive? Um, and so if they don't have any motive, it's unlikely that they're going to waste all that time going after that edgy case type vulnerability, right? So at the end of the day, if Dan, you built the software and you asked me to do a pen test, you know, in 6 months I come back and I see that you have mediums, these edgy case type scenarios, I'm going to say, yeah, these are possibilities that somebody could exploit this, but it's very unlikely, right?
Hmm.
And so then that would be up to you to say, okay, well, I'm willing to accept this risk. Or I could say, hey, you know, these are mediums. I gotta, work with your software developer, kind of like now, the situation I'm in, and we gotta completely have no mediums, you know, lows are like information, like there's no way to get in. They just these scanning tools, they just classify them as lows. And even highs are hard. I mean, what everybody's looking at is like these 0 days, right? um, 0 days are like where that's what everybody's going after. If you guys have time, I'm not sure if you're familiar with what 0 day attacks are, um, but I don't want to get off on a tangent, right? So that's what everybody's looking for. They're looking for 0 day attacks, meaning there's no patches out there, right? It's somebody um, develops a script that is able to hack, in simple terms, is able to hack into something, and then nobody knows it's there, nobody knows it exists, and then so let's say, Dan, we find a 0 day vulnerability, and I go to the exploit database to try to find a patch, and I'm like, I can't find anything. That those are the real concerns. I mean, to put it on in really reality perspective, that's what everybody's going after, right?
Let me
Is
ask
these,
this.
yeah.
We're talking a lot about our the drift in our own environments, the drift as far as how we're managing the company environments. There's also that drift when it comes to, um, maybe end users leveraging GPT when they probably shouldn't. The situations where maybe two-factor isn't enabled for an application. The good old shadow IT, they're, adding on SaaS applications that IT is not aware of and so on. So how do we get the point across and educate leadership within our clients that about this type of sprawl and how it's easy to fall away from the policies or procedures that have been put in place and been agreed upon, because I think once we get them to decide, once we get leadership to decide, hey, I understand, multi-factor, I understand the need that, we can't just go out and buy our own tools. Like, I understand all that. Once we get them to agree to that and they educate their team, if we once we have that buy-in, if we're not consistent with that and making sure that's followed through, it can easily steer away from it, and then we're having to have that conversation all over again. So, what are some ways that we can ensure that um, they are following through and they continually embrace it?
I you know I mean, it's just an ongoing thing. I think training is the best thing to do. And this is why people lose their jobs, right? Because they don't follow through. And not saying that is like you should scare people with saying, hey, if you don't do this, you're going to lose your job. But you could arrange it in a way that, hey, 3 strikes, you're out,
Yeah.
right? Like, we do our weekly trainings. Okay, if there's one incident, one employee has an incident, you say, hey, this is we're going to have to sit down and have a meeting with you, and you're going to be required to take these trainings again. Same employee has another incident. You come back to that employee, you say, hey, look, we sat down with you a few months ago. We had you do these extra trainings, and now you're having another incident, right? And then you say, okay, well, we're going to give you a week leave, and we need you to write a 5-page paper about why this happened, why you didn't learn from the first time, and come back and then have another meeting with them and say, okay, this was strike two. You got one more strike, and if you haven't identified, the issues of why you're being, a security risk, then unfortunately we might have to let you go if there's another third incident, right? So you kind of want to gently set it up that way and give people time to improve, right? And so there's that. I mean that's very lenient. That's on the lenient side. I would say most people just get let go, but that's what I would try to do, and that's the environment that I work in is set up that way. Um,
Yeah, excellent. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and I want to make sure that we're respectful of everybody's time. I do want to mention that tomorrow, I just threw into the chat, tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, tomorrow's February 12th. We have a webinar that's how to choose the right MDR partner in 2026 for the 24 by 7 expert threat detection and response. Um, this is being presented by Sophos. This is not a Sophos, even though we'll touch on Sophos. This is educational. Mark is going to go over 10, basically, it's basically a buyer's guide, 10 specific questions that you should ask when selecting any kind of MDR product. So it's well worth the joining this event. Of course, it is free. And so there is a link in the chat there tomorrow at 12, I'm sorry, tomorrow, the 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. With that being said, Dwight, I want to thank you for your time and knowledge. I greatly appreciate it. And for everybody that joined us today, thank you for being here. Until next time, we'll talk to you later. Take care,
all
everybody.
right, guys, take
Thanks,
care.
Mike.
All
Thanks.
Yep.
right, bye.
Thank you.